Now, the remains of the deadliest Kanishka bombing still haunts us. It, in fact, was the deadliest act of terrorism in Canadian history. The worst aviation terror attack until 9/11. Air India Flight 182, Kanishka, was blown up mid-air in June 1985. A bomb planted by Khalistani separatists killed all 329 on board, most of them Canadian citizens of Indian origin, including 24 Indian nationals. The aircraft disintegrated off the coast of Ireland. Bodies and debris washed up near Cork. Canada has called this a Canadian tragedy, but justice, of course, remains largely elusive. Only one man, Inderjit Singh Reyat, was ever convicted in the Kanishka bombing case. Today, it's 40 years since that happened. He, in fact, walked free in 2016 itself after serving 20 years in prison. The others either dead or were never prosecuted. In 2010, the final report of a national commission titled Air India Flight 182, a Canadian tragedy, laid it quite bare, saying Canadian agencies had intelligence suggesting a Khalistani terror plot targeting the flight. They failed to grasp the scale and seriousness of the Khalistani threat. CSIS surveillance was shockingly ineffective. These were the findings. Now, 40 years on, the families are still fighting, not just for justice, but for awareness, for answers. For the world to take note of this Khalistani threat that still looms. This month, a series of events will be held across North America. It starts today in Washington, D.C. The families are using this very moment to call out the nexus between Khalistani extremists, Pakistan's ISI, and the safe haven Canada has become for such elements. Joining me now is someone who lived the horror and then rose above it. Sanjay Lazar was a child when he lost his entire family in the Kanishka bombing. Today, he's an aviation and a law expert, a trade union leader, a hospitality veteran, a public speaker. His journey is, of course, one of grit, but also of that of truth-telling. He wants to speak out, and on this occasion, what better? He's now a vocal activist against Khalistani terror networks as well, particularly their growing influence in Canada. Also joining me here live is Puneet Sahani, a scholar, also an expert on Khalistani extremism. Thanks very much. But Mr. Lazar, let me start with you, and thanks very much for joining us on News9. Do you believe Canada has truly acknowledged its failure in the Kanishka investigation? Today, 40 years on, how would you remember it?
Namaskar, and thank you, Nabila, for having me on your show from Washington, D.C. At the National Press Club where we are at. Ironically, as you mentioned, Khalistani extremism, we're just 2 floors across from the Sikhs for Justice office, as you show Panoon on your screen. He's 1 floor below us here. No, I do not believe that Canada has acknowledged and put behind them the terrors of the Kanishka bombing. 40 years will be, commemorated next month, this month on the 23rd of June. And like you rightly said, we've put together a whole month of events, which started with McMaster University in Canada, in Hamilton, in Toronto. Now I'm in Washington doing press. I have to thank, of course, Puneet Sahani and Hindu Action, Mr. Utsav Chakravarti, who's put together this theme of events to draw attention not only to the Indian diaspora, but also to the United States government, the Canadian governments, letting them know that the terror of 40 years ago still exists. Whether it's Khalistan, Islamist terrorists, or Pakistan, that's the root of it all. And until and unless we put behind us and get justice for the victims of Kanishka, this cycle is bound to repeat. We see Khalistani terrorists today, literally attacking Indian embassies, whether it's in Ottawa, whether it's in Vancouver, whether it's Toronto, even in the United States, San Francisco. We've seen Islamist terrorists attack, Americans all over this country and abroad. It's a grave problem for us. So I believe it starts at the root. Let's not forget, Kanishka Air India 182 was the worst tragedy, aviation bombing in North American history until 9/11. We've never seen an aviation incident like that.
I want to ask you, what was the hardest part for you, Mr. Lazar? Losing your family to this bombing, and finally looking at the world itself moving on without justice actually being served. The Canadian government has literally let loose for the extremism to breed in the ground.
The hardest part for me was, of course, losing my family, going to Ireland to identify the bodies. But harder than that was, going to the trial in Vancouver and watching the killers get scot-free. My entire family died all over again. After the John Major inquiry, where I participated again in Ottawa, I imagined that the report of 2010 would give us some solace, but it looks like Canada has just forgotten what happened. They're repeating the same mistakes. Khalistani extremists, this cult of terror, actually controls governments across Canada. The last two governments we've seen have had great influence, the Khalistanis. Um, there's nothing in their history books. People have forgotten that this ever took place. It is my, you know, aim and ambition to draw attention to terrorism, Khalistani terrorism, and in specific to my own family's death and those of 331 people in both the bombs in Narita and in Ireland.
I see that you're emotional, and even to this day, you still feel the chapter hasn't closed because there are many of them who are involved are still scot-free. Are they alive?
Yes, yes, two of them are very much alive, and alive or dead, justice has to be done and seen to be done. People must remember and respect this. We have had unfortunately, in our world, we've had so many acts of terrorism, especially on aircraft. People remember Lockerbie, people talk of 9/11, people talk of TWA, of the Korean Airlines, people talk of the Iran Air being shot down. We don't hear people talking anywhere about Kanishka and the Air India 182. Not even in India, not in Canada, not in the US.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to talk about it. It's almost as though they're ashamed that 331 Indians died or Indo-Canadians died on an Air India aircraft. It's shameful, really. It's very shameful.
Let me
And that's what hurts.
Let me bring in Puneet on this. Puneet, I see Mr. Lazar there outrightly saying the Khalistani extremism has grown and grown to might since the Kanishka bombing. If anything, it had to be nipped in the bud, but it seems like they've got an environment to thrive. How do you look at the resurgence of the Khalistani extremism in 2024-25 as compared to 1985?
Well, things have gotten much worse in the 40 years, and that's the saddest part. And to take just one example, this guy Nitcher, who basically we even shared his videos and subtitled it, where he was from the pulpit asking for suicide bombings.
Yeah.
That guy, who cheated, entered into Canada and was a threat. He gets killed, and in the Canadian Parliament they have a motion on him. They have a minute of silence on that thug, who was talking about suicide bombings. And these families are still suffering for 40 years, and nothing happens. There is no motion for them. 40 years commemorating this in Canada. This Angus Reid is one of the most reputed pollsters in Canada. If you see, most of the kids in Canada, this is the biggest thing that happened in their country. Canada is known to be a peaceful country. Kids don't know. This guy Parmar, it's not just there were two inquiries. One was the trial, and then there is John Major's inquiry as well. And they worked on very, very hard evidence. This guy, we had credible evidence. He made a prototype of a bomb. He blasted it in the forest. How they assembled the transistor. So everything is very hard. So this guy is basically the architect of the bomb. That is not even a point of doubt or any discussion. That guy has posters all across gurdwaras, and now this madness is creeping into the United States. So it's a very, very dangerous thing, and it seems we have also not learned our lessons. And
but why in your expertise, why do you believe Canada has become this hub and the United States? You say that that entire region seems to be a hub for the Khalistan or Khalistani movement, Khalistanis, anti-India activities. What do you think is the reason?
So, you take like 40 years ago, also it was very risky for Sikhs to speak against Khalistan, right? And people who spoke against it, for example, Ujjal Dosanjh or Balraj Deol, they survived by a whisker. Many other people were actually killed by Khalistanis. But, these people were like street thugs. Now, if you notice what is happening now, these people have infiltrated all the systems of the Canadian government. So if any Sikh speaks against them, and, there is example of, for example, Ramesh Sangha, who has a Sikh, they made a report in 2018 that, this Khalistan extremism is a real problem in Canada. And, this Khalistan is made, you are demonizing the Sikhs. And the Sikh parliamentarian, from like a large Punjabi audience, he represents that constituency. And he said, there is no, Khalistan is separate, Sikh is separate, and, we should speak against Khalistan. So that guy, even though he's a Sikh himself, his constituency is Punjabi. He was called, you are a racist, and kicked out by Trudeau. So these people have infiltrated the institutions of the Canadian states, that now it has become impossible to speak. Earlier, you would be attacked by, by hammers or, swords on the street. Now you have to hear you are a racist in the parliament. So these things have infiltrated, and I think part of the problem is also like the Indian government, which has been very soft on it. They have removed the blacklist of Khalistanis, and which I condemn. And if you look at it dispassionately, it has brought a lot of damage, and there is nobody ready to take accountability for it. And I think we still have a soft approach towards terrorism. India is a country which is soft on terrorism. It was soft on terrorism, and it is still soft on terrorism. And yeah. So I criticize the Indian government as well.
There's been a lot said about the Khalistan movement having its association with the Pakistan ISI. What evidence, in your view, links the Khalistan movement across borders with Pakistan's ISI?
So, several. First of all, they are demanding this homeland from, Himachal to Haryana, and even, this Jat homeland of Tikait, that this is also Khalistan. But they don't ask, for a bit of Pakistan. So, whereas the Sikh homeland, like if you look at Maharaja Ranjit Singh's empire, 90% of that is in West Pakistan, which is now in West Punjab, which is now in Pakistan. Then if you see this Pannu, he's saying, we should support Pakistan. All these people who got training, this is a matter of record. I've shared on my Twitter profile so many times. So all these male militants, for example, even this Parmar, who bombed this Air India aircraft, he was hiding in Pakistan. So he basically, all the weapons they got, from Afghanistan, there is a Pashtun belt around the Afghanistan border called Dera Adamkhel. So from there, they got the rocket launchers and all these bombs. And
so
you can even read actually like
where are they funded
CIA
from?
reports.
Puneet, could I ask you, are they receiving adequate funds? Who's funding them? We see Khalistan referendum in almost every country of the world. Almost every Western country has a movement going, the Khalistani referendum. Give us a sense on how this population is only growing here and why.
No, the thing is, they have, by criminality, they have captured the Gurdwaras. And the Gurdwaras, you don't pay taxes. And in Canada, you also have like a Ministry of Multiculturalism. And if you go back, from Mrs. Gandhi's times, for more than 40 years, they have been criticized. So they basically get, this fundings and from, Gurdwaras. And they basically have captured it. So, Pakistan may share me funding. So, for example, in the recent clash we had in Kashmir, like Pannu is like basically nobody was on all their top channels, like Geo News and, talking nonsense all the time. But, this Western democracy gives them a lot of freedom to exploit. So they are being funded by the Canadian. Let me give you one example that you'll be blown away to hear. So when this plane bombing happened, it was very quickly found out that the Babbar Khalsa had done it, right? So Babbar Khalsa was the organization which had done the plane bombing. But do you know, it was a charity in Canada. Like you could donate money to it and get, tax benefits. And only when 9/11 happened, then the Americans, started getting serious. And then they were like, we have to ban terrorist groups. So the Babbar Khalsa was banned not in 1985, but in 2003 when the Americans asked them that, you can't have like terrorist groups. Till 2003, you could basically give a charity and get tax benefits if you donate to Babbar Khalsa.
Wow.
I want to chip
Yeah,
in
yeah,
for
go on,
about
Nazir. Yeah.
Pakistan. Yeah, 2 or 3 points. Number one, Talvinder Singh Parmar was an ISI stooge. And I say this because he had two ISI handlers. They were caught with him and he was shot by the Punjab police when he crossed over from Pakistan into Punjab. That is number one proof of Pakistan's. Jagjit Singh Chauhan, right at the beginning, was supported by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who invited him into Pakistan to set up Khalistan's capital and capture Indian Punjab to add into it. More recently, we saw the killers of Bian Singh and Hardeep Singh Nijjar. There are photographs. There's a Globe and Mail investigative report which links the ISI. They were training in ISI camps within Lahore and outside Rawalpindi. It's very clear evidence. The fourth thing is even recently, we see that if you look at all the Khalistani movement protests outside the Indian embassy, you will see Dr. Fai, who was an ISI leader, uh, apparently expelled, came to Washington. He lives not too far away from where we are at the press club. He is present and supports financially as well as emotionally. There are a couple of other agents who have been spotted with the Khalistanis in Canada. So there is no difference between the ISI of Pakistan and Khalistan. They are, sons of the same father. So it's a symbiotic relationship. Let's be very clear about that. Add to that the Islamists and the Kashmiri. Uh, Terry Milowski has rightly written that Khalistan is part of Pakistan's K2 project, which is Khalistan and Kashmir, to
Yeah.
destabilize and balkanize India. So there's ample evidence, ample evidence. I mean, we could write a book on this.
I'll take that final word from Puneet. If you could, in common language for the common man, give us a sense of what the Khalistan movement was all about and what it's turned out to be, Puneet, in a nutshell.
It's a jihadi movement, and there are reasons for it. There are pathologies that go, but it was the most bloodiest movement. And the problem with our Indians is we have very short memories. So I give you like just one statistic. So in 1990 and 1991, right, more 10,000 people died in Punjab. And back, they say like KPS Gill was very strict. Actually, that is the period when Gill was not in Punjab, and then the maximum killings happened. When Gill came, even the terrorists were like, okay, now we have to behave. But when he was not there was free for all. So on an average, 500 people were being killed. If you want to understand what that number is, so every month, 3 Mumbai 2611 were happening every month non-stop for 2 years. This was the most brutal insurgency and terrorism that we paid a lot of human cost, and it was the greatness of the Punjabi spirit that somehow we overcame it, and Punjab also bounced back. But this problem is
But where did
going
where
out
did
of
the
control.
Khalistani movement erupt? What was the demand of the Khalistanis at that point? Where did it originate? In a nutshell.
No, the thing is, again, it was never a popular movement. But the thing is, it overwhelmed the Indian state. So like it was a terror movement. So if you look at, you'll be surprised. Even after they created a Sikh majority Punjab, there would be time when Congress would win more Sikh MLAs than Akali Dal. So the Sikhs are not communal. They would not even wait. Akali Dal forget about Khalistan. But the problem is, a terror movement can totally overwhelm the state. And then there was like endless killings going on. And it was the greatness of, like the Punjab police that, it is the only
But why did
successful
they
example
want a separate
of defeating a
Khalistan?
terror movement.
Why did they want a
But
separate
again,
Khalistan?
these people, no, there is no demand. It's a Pakistani thing. Again, it's if you ask for it, it's basically like Kisan Andolan. Like what is black in this laws? Nobody can tell you. But they can totally overwhelm the state by by acting in this way. So there is again, some lunatic will say actually Khalistanis have never explained like what is Khalistan, what would be the status of Hindus there, will it be a theocracy, would be a democracy. So it's basically the figment of some lunatic's imagination, and every lunatic thinks in his own unique way that he's really special. So that is not the thing. The thing is there is a terror movement that is soaked in like bloodshed, and it's erupting, and India has to basically crack down really fast and has to learn the lessons from the 1980s. Otherwise, we'll push our generation to another, like, a dark place.
Right. We've heard you. We've heard both of you. Thank you very much. And we're only hoping and praying that justice prevails. Mr. Lazar, really appreciate you taking that time out and narrating for us your personal ordeal. And Puneet, thanks for explaining. Thank you.